Yellow is a 2021 extreme horror novel by Aron Beauregard. Yep, I returned to Aron Beauregard. If my scheduling pans out the way I hope for it to, this review should be posted on or around Halloween, and I figure it might be a fun, that word is doing a lot of heavy lifting, addition to my little October blitz that I'm doing. This will be my 5th book of his that I've read. I've read The Slob, Son of the Slob, Playground, and Wedding Day Massacre. At some point I might do like one of those tier lists ranking my experience with them or extreme horror in general, but I'd have to read more of it to make it worthwhile. We'll see. Let's just get into the book. Our main character is Oliver Fitch. He owns and lives above a convenience store with his wife, Lydia. He sank a lot of money into the corner store, and unfortunately the city they live in has really gone to the dogs in recent years. They are constantly harassed by creeps, gang members, and corrupt cops. Oliver only has one solid friend and ally, Ramon, who apparently does not possess the survival skills necessary to not piss off the corrupt cop that frequents the store as well. So anyway, one night this literally satanic gang leader, Damian Sanchez, he sends Angel, who harassed Oliver and Lydia at the beginning of the book, to go pick up a dude named Levi from prison. He specifically instructs Angel to get Levi some, kitty? If you get my meaning. This might still be within the first 30 seconds of the video. I don't know, so I need to watch what I say. Angel hears this and says, well, Levi doesn't like getting kitty. He likes taking kitty. And thus concludes that the best congrats on getting out of the clink present he can possibly give his buddy is the gift of multiple felonies. And by that I mean breaking into Oliver and Lydia's apartment and brutalizing them. Now, Aron Beauregard made an interesting choice here. He describes a pretty brutal physical and sexual assault against Lydia and Oliver, but actually not the worst thing I've ever read from him. Of note, Oliver perceives Lydia taking pleasure in his degradation. Also, part of this assault involved his face getting pretty badly carved up by Levi, who then proceeds to deride Oliver's cowardice by calling him yellow. But then, towards the end, Oliver blacks out, and we're next with him in the hospital being interviewed by Detective Treadwell, possibly the only decent cop in this unnamed city. I don't know if Beauregard was feeling all right when he wrote this book, because there was actually more violent degradation of Oliver that took place off-screen after he blacked out. It involved his wife, a knife, some bleach, and an orifice. I'll let your imagination fill in the blanks, but I'm honestly a bit bewildered that this wasn't shown in the book, given that this author rarely passes up an opportunity to write out a gruesome, messed up scene. Very out of character for him. So anyway, Oliver spends a whopping 2 weeks in the hospital after suffering severe facial and, rectal injuries, including contusions and, cuts. Then goes home to find that his darling wife, Lydia, has proceeded to yeet herself from this mortal coil. It doesn't come up immediately, but she left a note behind that's basically like, hey, Oliver, those guys came back for round 2. I didn't yeet myself because of that, though. It's because you're such a sad sack that I can't stand living with you anymore. Deuces! Oliver begins talking to her like Norman Bates style, and by talking I mean arguing with her, and will continue to do so for the remainder of the book. Bro has snapped all the way off. Unfortunately, Lydia yeeted herself before paying the mortgage, so now Oliver's time in their apartment is badly limited. We also learn that Officer Thomas, a corrupt cop that harasses Oliver regularly, has deliberately framed Oliver's friend Ramon for crimes against children. Remember when I said that Ramon didn't have the survival skills necessary to not piss off the corrupt cops of the city? Yeah, he bitched Officer Thomas out, and the bastard said, bet. Oliver hits up Ramon's brother, a guy named Alejandro, who would like to go clean, but unfortunately has no other choice but to continue working for Damian Sanchez because the dude is an actual psychopath whose retirement plan for his henchmen involves 2 bullets to the back of the skull. If they're lucky. And they're usually not lucky. After what happened to his brother, Alejandro obliges when Oliver asks him for some ordnance. And now we get to the revenge plot. First up is Levi. Bro comes back to Oliver and Lydia's apartment with a buddy looking for round 3. The cannon fodder buddy is instantly ventilated by Oliver, and Levi has his legs crushed with a sledgehammer. What follows is a scene of gratuitous torture, golden showers, and a scene with Lydia that would make Chandler Morrison proud. Remember earlier when I said that I was surprised how Aron Beauregard held back the brutality on that initial assault scene? Never mind. He was saving it for these ones. Maybe thinking he could lull me into a false sense of security, but I'm 4 books deep into this man's works, and I will not be bamboozled so easily. I know your game, sir. Next, it's Officer Thomas. He gets treated to some Looney Tunes shit where Oliver hides in a casket, waits for Officer Thomas to try and pick his pockets, and then blows him up with a grenade. Evidently, the officer was literally killing poor people so that his buddy at the funeral parlor would get more business, so the Undertaker ends up getting murked too. Next, it's Evelyn Watts, the banker lady that refused to cut Oliver some slack on his mortgage after being in the hospital. She's corrupt too and deliberately sabotages poor people's payments and accounts so they go under. I think the implication is that she's siphoning the money for herself. I don't know. She gets a very, very Aron Beauregardian death involving a red-hot fire poker and an orifice. The same orifice in which Oliver was violated earlier, if that clears up the mystery that I'm certain was just eating you up inside. The scene is extremely graphic and involves the kind of bodily fluids that actually make me nauseous, so let's move on to something so much worse! So we cut away from Oliver to meet a lady named Jenna. I'm making an effort not to get flagged by YouTube, so I have to say very carefully that her given name is Jenna, but with the suffix side attached to the end. Jenna, then the suffix side. I think you get the pun. Anyway, she works for Damian Sanchez, who apparently has a whole floor, the 13th if you were curious, of his hideout dedicated to pointless, degenerate shit. He's got people with their eyes gouged out and replaced with mirrors. He's got old ladies sewing a skin quilt. He's also got a bunch of kids hooked up, draining their blood into a coffin full of, no longer viable fetuses, I guess is the way I should put it. Also in the coffin is a lady named Orchid, who is pregnant. Not for long, incidentally. The worst extreme horror novel I have ever read thus far, in terms of extreme fucked upness, is Dead Inside, because of a scene with a, yeeted fetus, if you get my meaning. I did a review on it. Go check it out if you have the stomach for true and actual degeneracy. This scene might be a close second to that scene in Dead Inside in terms of how fucked up it is. So basically, Damian rips out Orchid's baby, consumes parts of it, very specific parts that make me want to puke a little bit, and then uses this in some sort of weird-ass divination ritual that allows him to figure out that Oliver is the one going after his minions. This might be the first time in one of these books that we've actually brought in a supernatural element. That's interesting. Anyway, he commands Angel to kill Oliver. So Angel does and is promptly beaten in submission. Oliver tortures him a bit, squeezes the location out of him, and then endgames him. Then he goes after Police Captain Mooney and Lieutenant Briscoe, the former of whom was named by Officer Thomas as he was dying. These two have been involved in human trafficking and have a building where they've been assaulting women and forcing them to basically cage fight to the death. The two officers get forced to basically do the same, forced into a cage and fight to the death, and Oliver also takes the time to clear out the human trafficker before he leaves. This is actually, like, the one heartwarming part of the book, strange to say, because he manages to save dozens of women who are all super grateful to him. It was actually very nice. Did I mention that Oliver keeps bing-bonging his dead wife? Yeah, I'd say I'm sorry to ruin that one bright spot, but if I have to suffer, so do you. Oliver gets captured and brought to Damian. He proceeds to grill Jenna of the age-restricted naming scheme on a massive satanic grill that was meant for him. Damian sends a pair of demonic goats to attack Oliver, and one fatally gores him. But Oliver, in a surprisingly not as gory as I would expect moment, manages to kill Damian. He dumps some money from Damian's hideout with Alejandro so that Ramon can rebuild his life. Earlier in the story, he contacted Detective Treadwell to show him where the building was where the officers were holding those cage fights and doing the human trafficking so that Treadwell can fix things. And then Oliver takes Lydia's corpse to the beach and they lie down and he dies. Boy, oh boy. So, I'll start with a compliment. I am impressed at Aron Beauregard's ability to weave an actually heartwarming moment into an otherwise degenerate novel. The scene where Oliver saved the women from the two corrupt cops was actually pretty genuine and touching, in part because they were saved, and in part because Oliver had an actual moment where he was able to feel like a hero who did something that mattered. This is an interesting bit of development, given that the whole story sprung from him feeling like a pathetic failure coward nobody. It It was also sweet that Oliver didn't forget about Ramon and was able to spend some of his final hours ensuring that his family would be monetarily cared for. I'm reminded of Playground, incidentally, because in Playground there were a few moments like this, some genuinely sweet or sad moments amidst the sheer and utter horror that was that book. It is, I think, a tribute to Beauregard's writing skills that he can pull those moments off convincingly despite the subject matter of his books. Speaking of which, this was creatively gory and disturbing, but I knew it would be going in. I was momentarily curious about whether or not this novel would engage in some restraint given that Beauregard held back on the goriest part of Oliver's assault at the beginning of the book, but the book soon reassured me that it would be living rent-free in my head in some dark, dark corner of my mind for the remainder of my days. The book overall was very campy, I guess you would say. I would argue that there's an element of that in all of Beauregard's books, although, maybe not. The Slob wasn't very campy that I can recall, and neither was Playground. Maybe I'm just remembering Wedding Day Massacre, since that's the one I've read most recently before this one. But so much is, like, comically exaggerated. You have Jenna followed by the Suffolk side, Damian Sanchez literally sacrificing babies to have prophetic visions, his messed up little hell where he's got people with weird, unique tortures being applied to them. It's just campy. And that's not an insult, just an observation. Camp can be great. According to the dedication, Yellow was inspired in some part by Charles Bronson's movies, particularly the Death Wish series. I've heard of Bronson and Death Wish, but I've never actually seen any of the movies, so I can't comment too much on the similarities. Apparently, Death Wish was pretty controversial when it came out, largely because, like Yellow, it involved a lot of revenge-based vigilantism, so the themes are similar, at least. The writing in the book was okay. I mean, like with a lot of extreme horror, particularly Beauregard's, the storytelling tends to be on the poorer side. It's here to connect the big gory scenes of violence together, that's about it. There were a few weird choices with the writing, too. Like on page 3, he says that the terror on Lydia's face was causing a warm, glossy water to spill out quietly. My brother in Christ, do you mean tears? That is the weirdest way I've ever seen anybody describe a character crying before. I don't know what thought process went into writing that sentence and choosing those specific words. That was weird. It was really weird. And I say that being like now 5 books deep into this man's work. I don't know that I've seen him write something like that before. That was weird. Like Wedding Day Massacre and Playground, you have a fairly large cast that you know is going to get axed, so it's a bit predictable. I'd argue Wedding Day Massacre and Playground are somewhat less predictable because the circumstances are less absolute. I don't know if that's the right word I want to use for this. Oliver's targeting very bad people, and this is a revenge story, so you know that most, if not all of them, are going to be dead before the novel's done. In Wedding Day Massacre and Playground, it was mostly innocent people, or innocent enough at any rate, being targeted, and so there's a little more mystery about who's going to die before the story is over. On the scale of trauma, say it's still not as bad as that one scene in Dead Inside, but the scene with Damian Sanchez and the baby sacrifice, it came close, man. It came very close. It came very, very close. It might be the most disturbing scene I've read in one of Aron Beauregard's books, specifically, but not in my forays into extreme horror overall. Next after this would be Playground, because it had a really disgusting scene towards the beginning with bodily fluids, but it didn't disturb me on the level that the baby sacrifice scene disturbed me. I am, as I mentioned at the beginning of the review, considering venturing out into other extreme horror authors, but I am deeply terrified of accidentally finding something worse than Dead Inside. My soul trembles to think of it. But yeah, it's Aron Beauregard. It's fucked up, bloody, violent, nightmarish degeneracy, and if you're into that sort of thing, you'll probably end up enjoying this one.